Well, a better than expected growth in the last 3 months of FY21 does some damage control as the economy contracts by 7.3% in the last financial year, the worst rate of growth posted in the nation over 4 decades. But this is still not as bad as many economists had feared. The government believes that the GDP numbers point towards a revival in the second half of FY22. That, however, did not deter top brokerages from slashing their growth estimates for the current fiscal. Let's take a look at some of the other high-frequency data to give you a sense of where the economy is currently at. Manufacturing PMI, an indicator of industrial activity, is slipped to 50.8 in the month of May. That is the lowest reading in 10 months. The slump in industrial activity could be attributed to strict COVID restrictions in almost all states. The road to recovery for the auto sector doesn't look smooth as well. Two-wheeler major Bajaj Auto has told CNBC TV 18 that inventory continues to be a cause for concern. India's largest car maker, Maruti Suzuki, has seen its sales decline by 71% in May. Vehicle owners are having a tough time as well. Fuel prices have touched record highs across the country. Petrol prices have crossed 100 rupees a litre in Mumbai. Meanwhile, the onset of the monsoon has been delayed a tad. The Met Department has said that the southwest monsoon will now hit the coast of Kerala on the 3rd of June, but a delay of a few days in the onset is usually no particular bearing on the quality or the amount of rainfall during the 4-month season. So what is the economy's trajectory likely to be over the course of the year? Joining us now is the Chief Economic Adviser, Krishnamurthy Subramanian. Also with me, my colleague Lata. Mr. Subramanian, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. My first question to you, given the impact of the second wave, what we have seen in sheer numbers, as well as the impact on out-of-pocket spending, not just in urban areas, but more significantly in rural areas, there is a clamour now building for a second wave of relief measures, fiscal support, income support, direct cash transfers. Is that something that the government ought to consider? Is it something that is on the table being considered?
Very good evening to all viewers, and thank you, Sharon, for having me. First, let me mention that we are 2 months into the current fiscal year, and the annual budget, which had received widespread support, was significantly expansionary in its fiscal stance, and had in fact the philosophy that was underlying that budget was indeed to expand fiscally, to implement counter-cyclical fiscal policy, with the focus being on infrastructure and capital spending. And if you look at the data for Q4, the data bears out. Of course, the budget was a culmination of what was being embarked upon over the last year itself. If you look at construction activity, for instance, in Q4 grew at 15%. The gross fixed capital formation in the economy in Q4 has touched 34%, which is significantly higher. So the philosophy that was underlying the policy push over the last several months leading up to the budget is still at play and has been widely supported as well. The impact of that will indeed come. So given that we are only 2 months into the current fiscal year, there is ample space for us to look at how the second wave, the impact of that, is panning out. We've made some assessments on that, but as always, as we've done over the last year, we remain absolutely ready to recalibrate and come up with new measures if we find it necessary.
Okay, so let me pick up on some of the points that you mentioned there. You said that we're just 2 months into the fiscal year. The ideas and the measures taken in the budget are yet to play out and are still in the process of playing themselves out. So, on the need for income support and direct cash transfer to the bottom of the pyramid, I'll ask you this in the context of what the former CII president, who just handed over, Uday Kotak, said that the need of the hour at this point in time is for at least 0.5% to 1% of GDP in terms of direct intervention to the bottom of the pyramid. Is that something that you believe is perhaps going to have to be part of the government's measures as and when you decide to roll them out? Because this was something that was asked for in the last wave as well, but you chose not to go in that direction. Do you believe that there is a need to review that position? At least the timing can, of course, be decided later.
So a couple of points, Cheryl, that here we must keep in mind. First, as I was saying, construction activity picked up by about 15%. And the reason the focus has been on construction is because it creates a lot of jobs in the informal sector, which certainly benefits a lot of the migrant workers and the poor, the urban poor. Of course, the rural poor have been impacted. Do keep in mind that the Manrega program is active, and yesterday, as I was showing in my presentation, if you look at the Manrega demand for the month of May and compare it to the corresponding period last year, there has been a significant decline, which is also an indicator of rural distress. The reason I focus on that is because, unlike in the first wave, there has been greater impact in the rural economy this time around, and therefore it is important to keep tracking the demand for distressed work as proxied by Manrega. So if you look at that, that's the second aspect. The third that I would point out is, if you look at overall consumption, after having declined by about 2.8% in Q3, it has grown by about 2.7%. There is clearly, we certainly want it to be growing at much higher rates, but the change of about 5.5% is something that is important to also know. So overall, I think I would say that there are many of the measures that have been taken have had an impact, and do also keep in mind that in the first round effects that of the virtuous cycle, when investment picks up, the impact of that then is felt on consumption with some lag. But as I said, we are only 2 months into the year, and keeping in mind all these facts and others that we get by talking to all the stakeholders, we will continue to be ready to take any measures that are required.
Okay. Dr. Subramanian, actually, you've thrown up many more questions from your answer. You spoke about construction 14.9% in the fourth quarter. That was indeed eye-popping, a very good number. But if you looked at the core sector numbers for April, cement has fallen by 15% compared to March. Steel is 20% output lower compared to March. So it looks like a lot has been also lost because of the second wave. So again, to come back to Shireen's point, that lack of jobs and lack of incomes at the lowest level is perhaps a more stark reality now. Hence my question again, that humanitarian help may be needed now when people don't have means, have already run down their savings for health reasons.
So if you look at the data on this, you will notice that there has been improvement overall in the in the numbers. As we had mentioned, construction activity has picked up by about 15%. Indeed, there is distress, and there is a need for us to actually keep looking at measures to take. But what I'm trying to say is that the second wave, the impact of that has indeed been felt. If you look at e-way bills, if you look at the power consumption, those have declined in the month of April and May, but over the last 10 days have started to come back. Okay. So the figures that you have pointed out, many of those are the impact of the second wave. And as I said yesterday, indeed, there is certainly some impact of the second wave, undeniable. But what is important to keep in mind is, given that these restrictions have been asynchronous and have been heterogeneous as well in terms of their timing, the impact has been actually varied across the states. I think the point that you're mentioning, is something that I'm quite sympathetic to. And apart from the support for the necessities through the PDS, the direct benefit transfers have been given, and in the past, and we will look at that seriously as well now.
Yeah, okay. I thought humanitarian need was a little imminent, but yeah.